Welcome to the paranormal and metaphysical world of Twilight Tonight. Host DeeDee Moonflyer grew up with very open-minded parents who had many experiences with UFOs and the paranormal. Because of her mom's insistence on exposing her to spiritual classes, meditation, and teachings of Edgar Cayce, DeeDee had a fascination and deep interest in the paranormal. Her own paranormal experiences have led her to seek out and interview other fascinating, knowledgeable people for better understanding of this phenomenon. Now, your host of Twilight Tonight, DeeDee Moonflyer.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Tonight, as always, an amazing guest on Twilight Tonight. Pete Orbea is with us in the house. He is the host of Paranormal Pete on WLTK-DB, a part of the family here. He is a seasoned paranormal investigator and a medium, and he is from a very unique town of Port Gable. Welcome, Paranormal Pete. How are you tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be on another show on the station here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I'm so excited to hear some of your stories. But first question I want to ask you is, what brought you to be a paranormal investigator?
Well, I think a lot of things adding up in my life over time brought me to that. I think there's a reason. I didn't start doing paranormal research or investigations until 2011, and I was living in historic Port Gamble here in Puget Sound, up in Washington State. And I think I was meant to come here and be exposed to all kinds of paranormal stuff and get to meet a lot of great people in the paranormal field up here and work with them as well. So I think it was a lifelong, I always had an interest in it. And it just kind of, growing up, it's, there's places I worked that there was a lot of activity. And so I was exposed to that and open to it. And then somehow I ended up here in Port Gamble working with my wife. And we've been here since 2007.
Wow. It sounds like a very unique town from what you told me. It's a New England looking town in California.
Yeah, I can give a little history on it. It's a really cool old town. It's one of the oldest towns in Washington State, and of course it was built around logging. There was a sawmill here, and it started in 1853, and the sawmill closed in 1995. So it ran for 142 years straight, longest running sawmill in U.S. history. And our oldest house here is 1859, and our newest house is 1919. And so it's a company-owned sawmill town, still is. Living here is great. The founders are from Maine. So when they came out here and started to build the town up, and as the population grew and more buildings, they really platted it out kind of like their hometown in East Machias, Maine. It's not the same, but it looks very similar, and all the housing is the same, same styles. The church here is a little brother to the church there. And it's really peaceful. You can hear the water. We're almost surrounded by water. At night, you can hear the water hitting the shores. It's real quiet and peaceful here. Some of the trees that are here are from Maine that were brought in over 100 years ago. And so in the fall, it really does look like a true New England town here. It's really pretty. And the summers are great. It's always like 10 degrees cooler than inland and a breeze, and the winters are mild mostly. So yeah, it's a really cool place. So there's still a company that owns the town. And so I started working for the town in 2011. and been working with them ever since. So I get to be the town manager of the town, which is like being the mayor in a sense.
So, Pete, my curiosities really got me. You live in this very historical town.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of experiences have you had in Port Gamble?
Well, I don't even know where I would start. I've had, I think, just about any type of experience someone can have. I think I've had. I do ghost walk tours and public investigations here, and I've been doing that since 2011. And we have a ghost conference as well. So I get to do a lot of activities for the paranormal. And there's a house here called the Walker Ames House, which is believed to be probably the most active location in the town. But it's definitely one that, as the town, we have the most access to it because there's no tenants or no certificate of occupancy. So nobody can rent it yet. And it's been vacant since 1995. And so we have the most access to it because there's nobody renting it. And so I've been poked, I've been touched. I've run into something that I didn't see. It was a person, knocked me backwards. I've had spirits answer questions directly to me, and the voice emanated from right next to me. I've seen full-bodied apparitions. I've seen in the attic of this house I was talking about, I've seen two like just stark red eyes looking at me from across the room. Heard all kinds of stuff. Crazy EMF in the house. It's not always the same, and it should be, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, those are all like just like investigation or on tours or doing my own investigation of locations. All that kind of stuff has happened. Psychically, I feel like I've seen some things, but I more often hear, at least in this town. I don't see as well psychically in the Walker Ames house, especially. I think I've spent about 1,000 hours in there since 2011.
Wow.
And I think because I've been in there so much, it's almost like I have blinders psychically in the house. I can tell if someone's there, but I can't tell you who or what they look like, or if it's a boy or girl or a man or a woman. So it's just kind of weird that way. But when I go other places, it's totally different and vivid and, intense. So I think it's just because I'm too familiar, I guess, with the town. But I don't know. I feel like I've had all different kinds of experiences. I don't think I've ever been scratched here in town, but I had a tool thrown at me from across the room and nicked my leg. Didn't hit it full on, but it nicked my leg and left a dent in the wall. Yeah, never been scratched. That's one thing I don't think I've ever had here.
Wow. So when you're out of town, do you find yourself becoming more open than you are in your own town?
I think being open's probably the same. It's just the things come in clearer for me. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't think I'm more open or not. I should say I'm not more closed off here. Maybe I am because I work here and I live here. Mm-hmm. It's not like, you're going to a new place and you're, going to check a new place I've never been to. I think it's easier to see what's going on your first take rather than on my 1,000th take.
Yeah.
So I think it's just I'm just too familiar or something here, but I think I'm open as much.
Are they too familiar with you, perhaps?
Right.
Familiar with you.
They say my name a lot.
Just Pete again.
Yeah, they say my name a lot here, and other teams over the years have captured, and even I guess apparently during our ghost conference this last November, we opened up multiple locations to investigate, and multiple people at different places were reporting that they captured things asking, "Where's Pete?" or just saying my name out loud in multiple locations. So that, I don't know. I guess I have a rapport with them.
Absolutely. It sounds like it, absolutely, which would make sense because you've been there and,
Yeah. Yeah, and
you're probably very welcomed.
well, I hope so. I've always said I'll help them if they can help me too. And I share their story. I share their history. I keep their story alive. Doing my tours and doing historical walking tours and doing museum tours and all that kind of stuff. I get to share their story and share what life was like here, things like that. So I hope they appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Which of them have the most impact on you?
Well, I mean, this girl Annabelle, this seems to be a female child spirit that I think is in a couple of different places here. When she speaks, it hits everybody. And so I guess she's probably the most impactful, and her name's Annabelle. And the only reason we know that is because she said that's what her name was. So that's what we call her.
Yeah.
So that one's, it's just, I don't know. It's more, the energy is more intense when there's something going on with her.
That's interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder, I've had somebody tell me that before, that children tend to be very intense because they don't have the same boundaries that adults have.
Right. I think I think that's correct. And maybe even more so. Children, are so much more perceptive than we are because
Yes.
it hasn't been taught out of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, children's spirit, definitely can have more of an effect. And she certainly is very vocal. So she seems to be one who's experienced often by many people. So I guess that's probably the most impactful one for me.
Do you think she's drawn mainly to women or both? She probably is attracted to you because you've been around so many times.
That could be, I don't know. It does seem that female investigators do seem to capture more audio evidence than guys do. I guess so. I think a lot of the spirits are probably drawn to females who are investigating.
Yeah. I often wondered that because I've had a lot of people tell me they feel children holding their hands or running around them.
Yeah. They probably feel more comfortable. I think if you look back in, let's say the 1800s, like for
Yeah.
instance, this town, I wasn't there, but I would imagine that the mom was she was there more for children, whereas the dad was probably not as connected with everybody, was, always working. I think a lot of ways that's still happening today, but back then, I think the mom, a mother figure, a nanny, or somebody probably would have been much more comfortable for a kid to approach than a man.
Yes, absolutely. What experience out of every one of those entities
Gosh.
or experiences have changed your life? If you could think of any.
It's been a bunch of them.
We,
I guess.
we want to hear all about it, Pete.
Let's see. Well, sometimes it's been other places where I've really had a super strong experience, but up here, running into somebody
Oh,
that
yeah. Yeah.
that was pretty early on when I started, and I was pretty skeptical of psychic work up until about 9-10 years ago. Very skeptical of it. And so for the fact that we saw a shadow on this staircase in this house, and I was asking, it was around Christmas time, and so I was asking if anybody wanted to come make a gingerbread house with me. come get in the Christmas spirit. Let's make some crafts, and the house was set up for our country Christmas festival here. So we had Santa's workshop on the first floor ready to go. It was starting the next day. So it was all decked out in there. And so we saw the shadow and I said, "Oh, thank you. That's awesome. You came down. Thank you." And then right after that, we heard what sounded like a child run the whole length of this floor above us. And we're all accounted for downstairs. So I shot up there thinking, I'm going to get up here quick enough to maybe see whatever this is. And I was walking, as fast as I could. I wasn't running. I was walking as fast as I could. And I got halfway into this room and just smacked into somebody that felt big, like a big guy. And it knocked me back. And I guess that was pretty impactful because one, it scared the tar out of me.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it. I was not expecting it. But man, it just knocked me back. And I thought the physical sense of the experience, the physical part of it I had was something that I couldn't see or perceive as I'm walking towards it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that was one of the ones that like really made me like a believer in the paranormal, like to actually run into something. So that was a pretty impactful one. I knew Port Gamble was going to be a special place when I started working at a business here with my lovely wife, Molly. And I was in the back of this place and it was a sign shop. So in the front of the shop, we had everything was really nice and had to be nice and clean for all the equipment. And in the back of the shop behind this wall is where we did like sanding and all that kind of stuff. And so this was 2007, somewhere around there. And I had only been hearing stories at this point of ghost stuff going on. And so I'm in the back and I was using a knife to clean the edge of something. And I tried a metal file and that didn't do what I wanted. So I walked about 6 to 8 feet away from me, set the file on a table. It was a flat file. So I set it on the table and then I went back to what I was doing, working off a set of sawhorses. And then all of a sudden this thing nicked my leg and hit the wall next to me. And then there was a ding on the floor. And so it hit the wall first and then the floor. And I looked down, well, there's a file on the floor. And then I looked at the table and there's no file. The file's now on the floor next to me and there's a dent in the wall where it hit. And it hit wood, old hard wood, and dented it. So it had some force to it. And I just couldn't explain how it went, 6, 7 feet across the room without hitting the floor first. And so after that, I was like, all right, something's going on here in this town. Something weird's going on here. Something strange in the neighborhood.
Yeah, surprise, right?
Yeah. I've been hearing stories and stuff, but that was my first experience in Port Gamble, and I was like, what?
Now, is this before you started to really do a lot of research?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't till 2011. The Ghost Walk tours were a part of our town's weddings and events business. We have a really big weddings and events business here. And so that was one of the things that the manager was doing at the time. And so I started doing the Ghost Walks in 2011. And then that's when I was like, whoa. It didn't take me long to become a believer. And then I started to meet all kinds of people at our ghost conference. It was the second year they'd done this ghost conference. And so I met all these awesome people, investigators, researchers, parapsychologists, skeptics, psychics. And so I started to meet all these different people. And I just kind of, it went from there, I guess. So that was like 2011 on. So prior to that, I was just interested in it and,
right.
thought it was cool that I had an experience.
So when did you start to realize that you could speak to them in mediumship?
Well, that was 2013. I guess it was a little slow at first. There was a couple little hints that I just didn't quite understand or paid too much attention to, and then in 2014 in March, I went to the Oregon Ghost Conference and got my first ever psychic reading, which changed my life. Because the guy I sat down with, a good friend, Seth Michael, with White Light Paranormal Insight. He sat down, wrote down a bunch of stuff, and then he said, "You're going to do your own reading." And I was like, "Okay, is this how it works?" I'd never had a psychic reading before. And we go through this reading. He's telling, having me describe anything I see in my mind, that sort of thing. And then I'm telling him, and then he's holding up his paper of everything he wrote down before we started, and it's exactly what I'm seeing and saying. And he told me I didn't even know what I had going on around me, and that he thinks I'd be doing my own readings within a year because I'm a medium. And my stomach sank.
Surprise.
And it was just like, and it was just like the dam broke during and then after the reading for a few days. It was just my stomach, my core, everything was like a million butterflies, like constantly going crazy in there. But it was just during the reading, I don't know. I had this inner realization, but I didn't, wasn't thinking what it was. And then it was just the floodgates opened. But the first time I ever thought, okay, something's going on here, was at the Port Gamble Ghost Conference. And it was just before that. And a friend of mine, I met him at that conference. He was doing readings for the audience. He had done a little presentation, and then he was just had some time left. So he was doing some readings for people in the audience. And there was a big projector screen behind him. So, a nice white background. And as he's walking around doing this, I'm seeing this shadow that doesn't look like his shadow following him around. And then when he would do a reading, this shadow would disperse into like this cloud. And sometimes there were some colors. And then when he would be done reading that person, it would condense down to this shadow. And I thought, wow, I haven't slept much the past couple days. I'm tired. I'm hungry. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. And then I walked up to this gentleman, William Becker, later became a mentor for me with psychic work. I was walking up to him to let him know what I saw. And as I walked up, I overheard another gentleman talking to him, describing exactly everything that I was seeing. And I thought, ooh, okay, that's odd. How does he know everything I was just about to say? Because it's the same exact thing I was going to say to a description. And I thought, okay, that's weird. So then I asked the two guys, I said, okay, I saw and experienced everything you just described. And the guy just turned and looked at me and said, well, now you have to pay attention. Now you've seen it. Now you have to pay attention. And so then I started to pay attention, and just a few short months later, I was down at the Oregon Ghost Conference and had that experience, and came back just not knowing what the hell was going on with me. But I was feeling all this crazy stuff for like 3-4 days. And my wife's like, what's going on? Like, she's like, you're gullible. What happened? And so I'm telling her, and telling her about everything that happened. And, she was gracious and, listened. And I think she was skeptical. And then she said, well, why don't you tell me something about me? And I knew it was going to be hard because I know her so well. We've been together for so long. So I knew it was going to be hard, but I just kind of went with what I was feeling. And then I started to see things. And I was, I had been to her grandparents' house. I was describing grandparents' house, but it was long ago that I was seeing. And so I'm talking about, it was like, I was talking about this birthday party going on and all these different details. Or, there's a guy like wearing a spoon on his nose to be funny, all this stuff going, okay, yeah, okay. But you need to tell me something you haven't seen or, anything like that. And it's funny because I saw her grandmother getting ice cream out, and I've always opened the ice cream from the top, right? The small,
Right. Yep.
I've always opened it there, right? But they didn't do that. They opened it on the big side and cut it into squares, and that's what I saw. And that's when my wife was like, "Oh my gosh, wait, there is." This could be this how are you doing this,
There's something
So
to this, right?
yeah, and then it just kind of, every time somebody would come over and hang out, have dinner, or just come over to hang out, like their great aunt or grandfather, and I'd be like, who's the so and so, I'm getting this name, who's so and so? Oh, that's my great aunt. And then it just kind of went on from there. Yeah. that was like the first part of all of it. So yeah.
And it hasn't stopped since, has it?
No.
No.
Hasn't stopped since. And I, things change, and I feel like, we always have to be learning. And so things change over time. I know that how I get information is different from when I started. So it's like, it's kind of cool because you're always learning. There's always something new to learn, some new way to do things, or some, you have a realization about spirit or what it's like on the other side, and it just, you never stop learning.
Oh, never. I don't care what anyone tells me. If they say they know everything, I walk away. It's a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
So
and it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that way.
Yeah. It's law in life, learning.
Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to talk more to Paranormal Pete, and we're going to hear some more stories from him, and more about his mediumship. We'll be right back.
Heard a girl scream down here.
Are you kidding me right now?
I'm listening.
Very well. Thank you so much. We're back with Paranormal Pete.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good.
My one question for you, being a medium, that's quite a responsibility. And with that responsibility, how do you feel about that?
Good question. Well, I think the more you do it, the more experience you have, the more you learn about it. And you learn what a great responsibility it is. I don't know that everyone realizes it at first. But I think over time, at least for me, I've kind of learned really that it is a gift and there's a lot of responsibility with it. So, I just try and be like for readings and stuff. I try and be, um, I don't know, professional with the client to, especially if it's difficult things that that's coming up that we're going to be talking about. It's, I have a responsibility to just pass along the message without filtering, but at the same time, I have to consider the person's feelings. And, so there's a little bit of responsibility of being kind. That's always a hard part. There's a big responsibility of checking your ego, leaving it at the door, and that's hard to do. I think if someone says that's really easy to do, it's not. For everybody, it's a little different, but that's a big responsibility. Checking your ego at the door. But I don't know that I'm not done learning, so I'll probably learn. It'll probably just keep getting greater and greater. You know what I mean, over time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'd try and be respectful to spirits, places I go. If I'm picking up on things, I always try and be respectful, not only of the living but of the dead. And
absolutely, yeah.
And my intent is to help, and that's always important to set your intent. And so my intent with mediumship is to help. And if there's a message, so there's not always a message, but if there's a message, I'm there to help get that across. And so I feel like I want to do right by the living and the dead. So, try and do it in a respectful way. Respect's probably the biggest thing.
Do you think with your ability with mediumship that it helps you with the investigations, kind of like you have a different kind of respect that maybe some investigators that don't have your gift?
Yeah, I could see that in some ways. Yeah, as a medium, you have a different insight to a place, rather than somebody that's strictly investigating scientifically. They'll have some sort of insight, maybe through client interviews and stuff, but as a medium, you definitely have different insight to a location. But at the same time, I think part of the responsibility is to try and do things in a credible way. Like taking notes and, holding on to that until the end, taking all your notes, trying to, be as unbiased as you can, or consciously be as unbiased as you can, not learn about a location that, you're going to investigate with mediumship. Don't try and not like going as a blank slate, which is hard to do in some places. And so, I think it does help. It certainly changed the way I investigate. Because I used to try and just investigate without mediumship because I thought it was all BS at that time, so I investigated a different way. Now I investigate with myself using myself and a notebook and an audio recorder, or just, keeping a vocal log on my audio recorder. So I think it helps, but, there's maybe ways, if you're not investigating as a medium or using your mediumship, there's maybe other things that you'll get from the investigation that you wouldn't get by doing it, investigating as a medium. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Does mediumship run in your family by any chance? Are these abilities?
Growing up, I didn't think so. And my parents were awesome growing up. We were all really into sci-fi.
Yeah.
So I was totally open to UFOs and knowing that, there's more out there, so that's kind of how I grew up. But what was the question? Sorry. I had it and
It's
then I
been a
lost it.
long week, Pete. A long week.
Oh, you're telling me. What was the question?
Does it run in your family?
Okay, that's right. That's right. So growing up, I didn't think so. I just thought I had, like, because of, love and sci-fi, that I had a crazy imagination. But growing up, I didn't know my biological father. And later in life, after becoming a medium and kind of through that in a way, I found him. And he let me know that there are many generations of women in the family that go back that were known as seers down south. And going back to old generations and stuff. So I found that out after being a medium for a short time, and so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. What part of the South are they from?
Louisiana, Mississippi. So
Yep. Interesting. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Have you been to New Orleans yet?
No, I haven't, but I hope to go sometime in the next year or two. That'd be fun. I really want to go check out all the old graveyards and just all the old building. I like to go anywhere there's old stuff.
Oh, it's
So
amazing there. You would love it. The activity is crazy though. Be
yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, yeah. And that part of the family, a lot of them is up in the Northwest, but originally from down there. So
Yeah. Interesting.
yeah, so that was kind of cool to, like, okay, so maybe it does run in families. Maybe it is genetic. Maybe it is passed down.
I always believed that is passed down. Myself, I always believed in that.
I think it definitely makes it easier to open up if it's passed down.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So I know you have a lot of stories outside of Port Gamble. What which place has shaken you to the core?
Well, as a kid, and I've told this story on my show, as a kid, seeing 2 full-body apparitions was pretty crazy, I'll just say. I was about 7 years old, and it was in Arizona. My grandparents lived in Sedona, Arizona, and I would go down there for some weeks in the summer. And so this was one of those trips. They'd come up. I'm from Idaho, so they'd come up to Idaho, and I was traveling back down to Sedona with them, and we were in northern Arizona. Hadn't been in Arizona for too long, but we're just driving down the highway, and it was like a pretty, straight run. Nothing on the sides of the roads. There were some adobe houses, couple 100 yards off the roads. You could see the red mountains way off the roads. Everything was very visible, just straight line. And all of a sudden, I don't know if I've ever tried to, like, put a distance to it, but not too far away from us, all of a sudden these 2 Native American men appeared in the road, and they were faced away from us, and they looked like they were wearing traditional wear. And so they were faced away from us, and one of them had a staff and the other had a bow, and they turned inwards towards each other to look back over their shoulders at us. My grandpa slammed the brakes on because he saw it too. He slammed the brakes on, and as we got to them, they just disappeared. We're looking out the mirrors, and they're just gone. It was like a cloud, just poof, and they were gone. And then he looked at me and said, "Do you see those?" I mean, he wasn't politically correct back then. He said, "You see them old Indians in the road?"
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, I did. And my grandmother was sleeping on the other side of me, and he said, "Don't tell your grandma, she'll get freaked out." And so that was like our secret. And
Wow.
but when he asked me if I saw him, I remember thinking, "Oh my God, that was real." And so I think that was one of those times that I definitely looked back on after discovering mediumship and was like, because one of those guys was my guide facilitating my awakening. Looking back, it's the same
Yep.
guy. One of the guys was there in my 30s for my awakening.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. So Arizona, Sedona, that whole area down there. I remember as a kid being at one of the national parks with the cliff dwellings, the houses that are
Mhm.
built into the side of the mountain.
Yep.
And this was one of those retrospective looks after I discovered mediumship, like, oh my gosh, I remember being in this place and feeling like somebody was following me around all the time. And I remember seeing a shadow on this wall, and it spooked me, and then it was gone. But the shadow was like a man, and he had bull horns. And come to find out, I think that's a Native American spirit. And so I remember how I felt, just that pit in your stomach, like, oh, something's going on here, So that was
Yep.
Sedona in Arizona was pretty cool for me growing up.
And how old were you when that was going on?
I was about 7 years old.
So you kind of had glimpses of what was to come.
Had no
and didn't
idea what it
realize
was. No
Yeah.
idea what it was. Not until 30 years later, a little less than 30 years later. So yeah, that was kind of crazy.
That's like a huge impact if you think about it.
Yeah, well, looking back,
Yeah,
I
you're like,
wish I would have learned more about it as a kid, but I just, I was more into Star Wars and all that stuff. So
well, yeah. How about, do you think that your grandfather also had abilities because he saw the same thing you saw?
well, I've wondered about that. And he may have, but probably because of his generation, it's not something they talked about, and
Yeah, very true.
so he may have. I mean, I always felt a strong connection with my grandfather, even after he passed. He was a big part of my life, and a lot of who I am today is because wanting to be like him. And
Sure.
So he very well could have been, but he didn't say anything. At least, well, I mean, I was a kid.
Right. He wanted
If
to
he said
protect
something,
you.
it probably wasn't around me. Maybe my grandma knew. I don't know. After, so my grandmother passed about 15 years after him, and this is after I discovered mediumship, but it was still really early on that. I all of a sudden, walking through my dining room, I all of a sudden got this vision of these hands, and one of them was my grandpa's hand and the other one was my grandma's hand. And I kind of just kind of pushed them together in this vision, and then they turned and went into this light. And then my dad called me like less than a minute later and said, we just heard your grandma just passed away. And I was like, I know.
Oh,
He came and got her. So
the hands are just a beautiful story.
I know, it was so cool that it just hit me like a ton of bricks as I'm just walking through my house, and I was like, whoa. And then they turn and go into this light, and then I got the call. Pretty wild.
I think it's beautiful. They just wanted to say goodbye. That's just a beautiful story, actually. I really like that.
Yeah.
They must have really, truly loved each other.
Oh my gosh. Yes. They were so in love. It's inspirational. Like you want to be the old in love married couple, right?
Absolutely.
Whoever it is you love, you want to be old with them. And they were so cool. They were so in love.
You want to be peas and carrots.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, they were great. Both sets of my grandparents were awesome, and
Ah.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So you grew up and then you started investigating, and then outside of all of that, and you're on an investigation out of state, which one actually made you feel fearful, if any? Since you have that ability of mediumship, it could be nothing. And not in Port Gamble.
Not in Port Gamble. I
Not in Port
guess. I don't know. I guess there was one time where I got kind of scared for my kids because we
Really?
were at this old army fort. There's a place called Port Townsend up here in Puget Sound, for those that don't know, and there's a lot of these old forts where they had huge guns to protect Puget Sound. And so one of the forts up there, Fort Flagler, they have all these bunkers, and that's how they move the ammo around. There's all this at all these army bases. There's these intricate systems of bunkers, so you go down into them, and then there's all these tunnels and stuff like that. So we were at Fort Flagler, which was considerably smaller than some of the other ones. And we were I was with my family, and we were gonna go down into this bunker, and it got a couple steps in, and there was a gentleman standing at the bottom of the stairs, just in the light, because it was darkness, because it's a tunnel,
Right.
but there's light from the staircase, that coming down. He was just in the light, and there was a gentleman standing there, and he had like a white shirt and like dungarees on, and his stomach was all bloody, like he was kind of holding his guts. And he looked up at me. We made eye contact. His eyes were totally white, and he just had this awful expression on his face, and just anger and it happened quick. But I go to step in, and I just remember being like, "We're not going down this bunker," because that scared me. Because we made eye contact, and then he just like, and he was like, went back in the dark, and he was gone. He just like didn't dissipate, but it was like he just like a beam of light back into the darkness. But we made eye contact, and that just freaked me out, because I did not feel good stuff when we made eye contact. That was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here type feeling.
Yeah, he just didn't want you to come down that tunnel.
And he was mad about whatever had happened to him. So yeah, I didn't like that. That freaked me out.
You're like, I want no part of this anger.
Yeah. They don't need to show me their death state or how they died. I would rather, see them how they want to be seen. But maybe that's how that one wanted to be seen. I don't know.
And in your opinion, when they show you their death state, is there a reason why they show you that death state?
I don't know that I can give you an answer one way or the other. I don't know. It's rare that I see that. I mean, like 1 out of 100, I might see that. So it's pretty rare. I think it could be either they either don't know they're dead, or they are so angry about what happened to them that they're staying there to try and fix it. It could be any number of things. I don't know why. I don't know why it's rare and not more common for me, or why I even see it at all.
That's probably a good thing that it's not common. I think that would be the most disturbing thing to
Absolutely
see them in that state.
Mm-hmm.
Unpleasant all the way around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, which home do you never want to go back to, if any? I should say building.
I can't think of any. I'll go back.
But I won't
Maybe
go down
not
that tunnel.
maybe not that bunker particularly, but yeah, I'd go back. I don't know. I think once you have contact with spirit and you get to see a little bit of the other side, like it changes your perspective on things. So I don't really
Yeah.
get that scared. I guess I'm more scared of the living during an investigation than the dead.
I concur.
or like an animal, if it's like out in, if you're out in a real rural type area, I'd be more worried about like a cougar or something, like up in this area, or a bear, something like
Yeah,
that.
I get it.
That scares me more than anything. So,
Or a parrot.
yeah, I like birds. Birds are cool. When I was young, we had cockatoos, and more than once, and we had an elevated cage that was, it was on a stand that had a little hanger there, and so it was a suspended cage. More than once, I came home to my Siamese cat with her whole arm stuck in the cage, dangling from it, trying to get the birds, and they're just on their top perch laughing at her.
Yeah, looking at her like, no. Oh, she taunts them all. The cat, the dog. She's terrible. Terrible bird. No, I love that bird more than she's a rescue. I love her. What's coming up in March for you, Pete?
Well, let's see. Well, even February, I have a ghost walk and I have a special investigation. I usually do once a month, November through April. So in March, I think I just have a ghost walk tour in March. And then I'm going to the Oregon Ghost Conference in Seaside, Oregon, March 24th through the 26th. And so I'll be there, have a vendor table, promoting Port Gamble. I'll be doing readings all weekend, if people want them. And
well, I'm sure they will.
well, yeah, there's a lot of great readers and stuff that are there. So it's always a great time. I get to do a speaking presentation. And I usually help out with some of the tours down there. Last year I had a really cool experience I'll tell you about real quick. Now this didn't like scare me or anything like that. It was more of like a wait, what sort of thing.
No moment.
Yeah. So there's multiple locations that you can go investigate during that conference as well. And that's OregonGhostConference.com for everybody out there. So it was this place. It was Starry Night Inn is what it's called. Really cool little place to stay. I wasn't staying there, but it looked really cool. It was an older house and it had been moved around in Seaside, so that was kind of interesting. And so upstairs is some of the rooms that you stay in, and it's a little lodging establishment. So I kind of joined the investigation. There were already some people going, and it became time for like everyone to switch, like to go to outside to the back of the house and go down in the basement. So it was like time to like switch up where everyone was hanging out. And so this group of ladies opened a door to one of the rooms, and as they opened the door and were kind of standing, starting to kind of file out, there was four of them and one sitting on the bed. And I happened to notice I was standing at the other end of the hallway, and while they're standing there saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't know, we got this reading," kind of talking about what they were doing, I saw the fifth one, and she was like sitting on the bed, leaning so she could see past everybody down the hallway.
Right.
Well, four ladies came out that were standing there, and they just shut the door with the fifth person in there. And I was like, "Hey, well, what about her?" And they're like, "What do you mean? There's only four of us in the room." And I go, no, open that door. And then there was nobody in there. And I know I saw a fifth person sitting at the end of the bed looking, trying to listen to what was being said. she looked totally real. I totally thought it was part of the group, and then I thought they just shut the door on that person.
How rude.
Yeah. So that was
even there.
Yeah, so I'm going to. That's a really fun conference. There's a lot of great classes and stuff like that there. So March 24th through 26th, and Seaside's just fun anyway. So I'm really looking forward to. I look forward to going to that conference every year, because that conference is the one that changed my life, where I had my psychic reading that just changed everything for me. So it always has a special place for me.
I bet. One quick question: your dream place to investigate or go?
Ooh. I'd like to go to any place in Europe that's an old building. Gettysburg. I want to go there. I haven't been to Virginia City yet. A lot of Old West. Anywhere. I want to go anywhere. I'd like to go back now, actually, now in my life, to the Idaho State Penitentiary building, because I spent time there as a kid. Not what you're thinking. It was closed. But there were festivals that were held there, and we go there on field trips. And that's one of those places where I looked back and was like, I remember feeling so weird and heavy. Oh, that's why there was spirit there. And so I want to go back now. I want to go back now and see what happens. It's not a dream place. Gettysburg's a place I really want to go. I don't know, really anywhere with old stuff. There's ghosts everywhere. They're not
definitely.
They're not just in places people say are haunted. They're everywhere.
Very true. What night is Paranormal Pete on?
Thanks. Yeah. Paranormal Pete show. Yeah, that's on Tuesday nights, 11 Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. And it's an hour-long show. And we talk about a lot, same subjects you do. I have a lot of mediums on. I have a lot of investigators on. We talk about Bigfoot, UFOs, whatever's not normal. We'll talk about it. But it's a lot of fun. Tuesday nights. Yeah, you can find me here on the station. It's so cool to see the station growing as much as it has been. And so, yeah, this is really cool. Thanks for having me on your show, and definitely be looking forward to having you on my show as well.
Of course, anytime. You just let me know, Pete.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, thank you.
You have a great weekend. Thank you for the interview. I really enjoyed you. You're a wonderful spirit. Thank you, Todd Bates. And I hope I see everybody next week. Take care, Pete.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye, Magbird.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.